Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to our talk today called Protection and Promotion of Children's Rights. The Office of the Children's Commissioner, commonly known as OCC, is the specific division under Suhakam that caters in Malaysia. The OCC, the Office of the Children, is an independent office protecting the rights of children. RC. Allow me to introduce myself. William Michael. I'm from the Committee for Child Protection of Kuala Lumpur. Afternoon, we have a very distinguished speaker in the person of Professor Dato. As moderator for our talk today, is a member of the Committee for the Archdiocese of Kuala Lumpur in 2019. Amy Bala, graduated with a Bachelor of Social and Advocacy Science Malaysia, USM, in Penang, 1982. Department of Social Welfare, common known as JM, Jabatan Kebajikan. Amy was actively involved in children's services, designed and conducted training as well as JKMs, as well as NGOs rather, on childhood care and rights of the child. Now, retired from JKM, as the current Vice President of the Malaysian Association advocating social change to awareness and education. Amongst the other commitments of the special work on the social work profession bill. So dear friends, the sequence for today's talk will be as follows. After my introduction, Puan Amy Bala will take over and she will introduce the speaker for the Professor Dato' Azia, and Professor Azia will speak from 2:15 to 2:40 for now to all of us. And we will open the floor for Q&A. Q&A will be in first and which we are in. You can also post your questions in chat. And our people at the back end team will and they will post. So thank you for your time, and over to Puan Amy, our moderator.
Thank you, Father. Thank you very much. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all of the participants who have come on to the webinar. And thank you for making time on a Saturday afternoon to be with us. Today, as Father William just said, we have a very esteemed speaker who is the Children's Commissioner, the very first Children's Commissioner for Malaysia. As many of you might know, CRC was implemented in 1995 and several committees were set up, legislations were amended, and all the while child advocates, child rights activists actually advocated for a focal point and a point of reference so that they could advocate for more issues and have a voice among them for children. And we are really very lucky that the government appointed Professor Dato' Azia bin Muhammad Awal on the 23rd of August for a term that goes on until 2022. Who is Prof. Azia? Prof. Nur Azia is actually a professor of law at the National University of Malaysia, or commonly known as UKM. She is a professor currently teaching at the university. Her specialization is actually comparative family law, child law, women's rights, and also Malaysian legal system. At her tenure at UKM, she has also served as Deputy Vice Chancellor of Student and Alumni Affairs and as Deputy Dean at the Faculty of Law. Prior to this, she was the Malaysian representative to ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Women and Children, commonly known as ACWC, for 3 years, 2016 to 2019. She was also a member of the National Advisory and Consultative Council for Children at JKM. Professor Noor Azia has written 5 books and numerous articles and chapters in books relating to family law, comparative family law, women and law, and child laws. She has also received awards, namely in 2016 and 2017 at Toko Mal Hijrah, once as an icon and another as the first from the state of Negeri Sembilan as well. Okay. As Father William mentioned, Prof will speak until 2:45, and then it will be open for questions. You can, all of your phones will be muted at the moment, right? So at 2:45, you can unmute and ask questions directly, or you can type in the chat box. So can I now invite Professor Dato Noor Azia Muhammad Awal to do her presentation. Prof, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Puan Emibala, Father William, members of the committee, and participants. Selamat petang, a very good afternoon to all, and salam sejahtera. I will try my utmost best to do a half an hour talk or so. I think it's about, well, maybe a little bit more longer than that, talking on promotion and protection of children's rights in Malaysia. I'm going to share my slide now. Hang on, I hope I'll be able to do that. Okay, can everyone see my slides? Yeah, okay. Now, of course, thank you so much for inviting me to talk on rights of children and protection and promotion of children. And I think this is the first time that I actually have the opportunity of talking to a church committee kind of, yeah. But I was informed that this is for general public as well. So in terms of rights of children in Malaysia, the introduction of rights of children, this was done, if we can all remember, in terms of human rights issue. In 1948, we have the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then in 1959, we have the UN adopting the Declaration of Rights of the Child. This is just a declaration consisting of 10 rights and was not legally binding on countries that signed it. In 1978, I think in terms of children's rights, it started quite some time ago, until in 1978, the government of Holland submitted a draft convention on rights of children to UN. And then on the 20th of November, the convention was adopted by the General Assembly. By preserving the spirit of Declaration of the Rights of the Child, the convention reflected contemporary issues and concerns that emerged in the past 30 years, such as environment protection, drug abuse, sexual exploitation. Came into force in 1990, ratified by more than 20 countries at the time of its ratification. And by 1st December, I think there's 153 countries have ratified it, and Malaysia actually ratified in 1995. Now, in terms of the problem with the rights of children is always kind of always sharing, priorities has been given, if you put want to put it that way, to rights of woman, mother in particular. And there was a lot of in England in particular, and some parts of the world, where women's status of woman and issue of the position of woman in family, and where when and of course at that time, when they get married, they and divorce, and they were not able to have rights to custody of children. So because of that, rights of children was incidental to other rights. So the priority been given to women and mothers at that time. So when UN passed the convention, there is four main principles that I would like to explain. Of course, the four main principles. The convention has 54 articles, and the four main principle is the principle of non-discrimination. This means that right to develop, children cannot be discriminated. Children have equal rights to access to education regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, disability, parents, sexual orientation, etc. This is under Article 2. So non-discrimination means that children are children, they must be treated equally. And however, I think Malaysia has actually reserved this article, but I will deal with that later. And then the second principle is the principle of best interest of a child, which must be a primary consideration in all actions and decisions concerning children. And we must use this to resolve conflicts between different rights. For example, when making national budgetary decisions affecting children, government must consider how cuts will impact on best interest of child. I mean, even during now during COVID, we always wonder what happened to the policies on children, even in terms of aids, in terms of assistance given, financial assistance is usually given to head of family or to father and mother. But in terms of children, it is just based on the family rather than children themselves. And the right to survival and development is underscored the vital importance of ensuring access to basic services and to equality of opportunity for children to achieve their full development. For example, child with disability should have effective access to education and healthcare to achieve their full potential. But that is because they are person with disabilities. But otherwise, children should be able to have access to all these rights that they have without any difficulties. In views, and then the last principle is views of children, means that voice of children must be heard and respected in all matters concerning his or her rights. For example, those in power should consult children before making decisions that will affect them. And this is a very important area, four main important areas in terms of the Convention on the Right of the Child. I'm just going to expand a little bit on Article 2, and this is Article 2, where it states that state party must not discriminate children, and then state party shall take appropriate measures to ensure that child is protected against all forms of discrimination or punishment on basis of status, activities, express opinions, etc. And sadly, Malaysia reserved this article, and of course, when we actually ratify CEDAW, we have actually amended the Constitution and Federal Constitution Article 8. We have amended and inserted the word gender, and however, other articles, in particular now, there's been a lot of discussions on issue of citizenship, where Article 14 has not been amended, and it is still discriminatory on women, in terms of gender discrimination. And of course, in relation to Article 12, rights to education, the word specifically used is every citizen rather than every person, and which means that they are children that will be discriminated in relation to their rights to education. Article 3 is the best interest principle or concept that shall be the primary consideration. And Article 3 is very important, and the state party must undertake to ensure that the child such protection and care that is necessary for his or her well-being, taking into account the rights and duties of his or her parents, legal guardians, and other individuals. Yeah, and this and shall take all appropriate legislative and administrative measures. State parties ensure that institutions, services, and facilities responsible for care or protection of children shall conform with the standard established by competent authorities, particularly in areas of safety, health, and in the number, stability of their staffs, as well as competence. Now, this concept is very important, and of course, in terms of the general comment on issue of best interest of children. It was said that in terms of administrative decision as well as even courts, they have and also even adoption policies, policies, strategies, program, plans, budget, legislative, and budgetary initiative and guidelines. All implementation measures concerning children must make sure that they look into or abide by the principle of best interest. Guide decisions by all those concerned with children, including parents and caregivers. Best interest of a child is a dynamic concept that encompasses various issues which are continuously evolving. The word best interest of the child principle shall be primary consideration, which provides special protection of children in any context and acknowledge their unique vulnerability. The principle is a non-derogable nature, which means that it does not allow for limitation even in times of emergency. And the example that I gave, this was a case from Tanzania, which was appealed to the UK Supreme Court. That specified the best interest of a child has to be considered first. And in the case that no compromise can be found, it can only be outweighed by the cumulative effect of other consideration. Meaning, it must be given a priority. You look at that first, but let's say there are two other rights that is actually conflicting. Then you look at, it has to be weighed in terms of all the cumulative effect of the other considerations as well. Yeah. And the principle actually is, it has a certain way we can actually look at substantive rights. These are the principles of best interest. Substantive rights oblige states to consider the best interest of a child, take it a primary consideration when different interests are considered, and the rights is implemented when the decision is affecting child. This is from the Child Rights Committee. This creates intrinsic obligations for states. Yeah? A substantive right is directly applicable and can be invoked before the court. And the principle as fundamental interpretive and legal principle require that if a legal provision is open for more than one interpretation, the interpretation which most effectively serve the child best interest should be chosen. So it's kind of just guidelines and how it is being applicable. And of course, there is no standard definition what is best interest of a child, but the court must take into consideration certain things when they are looking at the basic when they're looking at best interest principle. Best interest determinations are generally made by considering number of factors related to child circumstances, or to the child's circumstances and parents or caregiver circumstances, capacity to parent, and the child ultimate safety and well-being. Now, these could be part of parcel of when we are looking at issue of children in terms of child abuse, whether the child needs to be removed or to be kept in institutions, the importance of family integrity and preferences for avoiding removal of a child from his home, health, safety, and protection of the child, the importance of timely permanency decision, assurance that the child removed from his or her home will be given care, treatment, guidance, and that will assist the child in developing into self-sufficient adult. Now, other factors, of course, when looking at the four factors, four considerations that I mentioned, you talk about the emotional ties and relationship with the child and parents, siblings, family, household members, the capacity of parents to provide safe home, adequate food, clothing, mental and physical health needs of a child, and mental and physical health of parents, and presence of any domestic violence in the home. Now, best interest as far as Malaysia is concerned, when you're talking about child abuse cases or domestic violence cases, how the court would decide on this issue. This is interesting because, as we know, we have a Child Act, and then in the Child Act it provides that there are cases of children that need protection, care and protections. Yeah. Which I will look at. But since I'm discussing already the best interest principles, now factors considered in court, it is important to note that courts do not simply take a parent's word for it when considering accusation of domestic violence and child custody. Judges generally consider whether the alleged instances of domestic violence had an effect on or were directed at the child, whether accused continues to pose danger to the child and the other parent, the severity and frequency of domestic violence. And this is when the violence is on the mother or sometimes on mother and children. And then whether there is a pending criminal case against the accused, any physical evidence of abuse, including photographs, police reports documenting incidents of alleged abuse. Because there are occasions where domestic violence report or cases could be used against in terms of custody application. Yeah, and in terms of it also have an effect on instead of domestic violence, don't just impact child custody determination, it also impact on accused, whether accused will have access or visitation. Yeah, the court may choose to revoke the accused parent's visitation rights, temporary or long-term order, supervised visitation, revise the accused parent's existing visitation order preventing parenting classes or anger management classes, which in Malaysia, I don't think we have any of this. Order the accused parents to participate in domestic violence counseling, issue of a restraining order or order of protection. The thing is, in Malaysia, since we started at SWAKAM, the Office of the Children Commissioner, there are cases where there has been a domestic violence being reported, the child has been taken to the hospital, there were medical reports, so on and so forth. Of course, there are occasions that this child will be taken to court for children, and the court will have to decide who would be able to look after the child while the police is still investigating the matters. And even in those circumstances, even with police report, there are times that the court would allow visitation. So to me, if you look at some of the practices abroad, they would probably not allow, even if it's maybe a supervised visitation, if the perpetrator is the father, and then otherwise he will stop visitations for a while until the case is finalized in court. But again, you must remember that the child has a right to both parents, and this is something very difficult in terms of even when there are domestic violent cases, and it can also be used in terms of to shield or to be used in court so that the accused will not be able to have custody and also visitation rights. Yeah. If the court for children, of course, we know under the Child Act, in terms of the court can actually make an order for the child to be for in terms of protection, order his parent or guardian to execute a bond to exercise proper care and guardianship for a specified period. This is for children in terms of children that conflicts with law. Make an order placing a child in custody of a fit and proper person of specified period by court for children. Now, the issue of fit and proper person, because the Ministry of Women and Family Community Development has just started a pilot project in terms of family-based care after the amendment of 2016, and they are now looking at this. What do you mean by fit and proper person who could actually look after the child while cases are still going on in terms of the child himself or the family, without making any other order, or in addition to an order made under paragraph A or B, make an order placing the child under the supervision of a protector or some other person appointed for the purpose by the court for children for a period of specified by the court, or make an order placing the child in place of safety for a period of 3 years from the date of an order or until he attains the age of 18, or in the case of a child who has no parents, or guardian, make an order placing the child in care, custody, control of foster parent found to be suitable by the Director General for a period of 2 years or until he attains the age of 18, whichever is shorter, pending that the place of child in place of safety. So in terms of children that need care and protection, these are some of the provisions where the court could actually order the child to be placed with other person, families, and so on. Yeah. Now, in terms of the four main principles, just now I've mentioned Article 2, Article 3, and Article 6 is rights to life and the development, inherent right to life, and parties to ensure that the maximum extent possible the survival and development of a child. Development of a child is very wide. Could also include a right of child not to be given food and to grow up, to be given education, medication, and also then right to develop himself from where he is, and then early childhood development, and then going to school and so on until he or she is 18. Now, and also not to be abused. Right of a child not to be abused is within Article 6, but of course the articles on abuse is also provided in the convention. Article 7, right to be registered immediately after birth, right to have a right from birth to a name, right to acquire nationality. This is the main issues that have been discussed particularly this year when there's a case in court about a child applying for citizenship, and actually state party has the obligation to implement these rights in accordance with national law and the obligations under relevant national instruments in this field. In particular, child would otherwise be stateless. Now, we have, in Malaysia at the moment, sadly, we have reserved Article 7. So Malaysia, when signing a CRC and ratifying CRC, actually reserve Article 3 and 7. To me, Article 2 on this non-discrimination is very, very important article. If you're talking about a tree, it is the trunk, it is the most important, or even the roots of that particular tree. So when you reserve the roots, of course, how can the tree actually grow and expand? So to me, it is in itself, the reservation is one of the greatest challenges in terms of promoting and protecting children's rights. Yeah, and Article 7 now has been highlighted in terms of being highlighted because of the cases where children are stateless and they are applying for citizenship. They may be children of Malaysians, but because the mother is Malaysian, but the father is a foreigner, and the child is born abroad, or sometimes child is born in Malaysia, but we don't know who his or her parents, was given to children homes and they were adopted. And in the birth certificate, it's just stated by JPN to be non-citizen, and this is something that I think has discriminated children so much and has caused a lot of hardship in families and also in children, because children, as soon as he was born, he has a right to a name and to a nationality. He had a right to know who he is, his roots, his families, so on. Now, when we talk about rights of children, after 26 years of CRC, from the time that we sign it, not from the time when CRC was actually passed. Yeah, Malaysia, as far as Malaysia is concerned, Malaysia still have 5 reservations: Article 2, Article 7, Article 14, freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, Article 28, 1A, free and compulsory education at primary level, and Article 37, 7 on torture and deprivation of liberty. And these are the greatest challenge in terms of how do you children be able to implement or to fulfill their rights, in terms of CRC. They are not able to do that because we are still reserving this, and these are quite, at least Article 2 is one of the core principle of CRC, and that I think is important to know. And then, but of course, we have always been reminded that we have our federal constitution. The fundamental liberties are guaranteed in the federal constitution. We have Article 5, liberty of person; Article 6, slavery and forced labor, which is prohibited; Article 7, protections against respective criminal laws and repeated trials; equality, this is Article 8, which we have inserted the word gender into it; prohibitions of banishment and freedom of movement; we have freedom of speech, assembly, and association; and we also have, that is under Article 10, and then Article 11 on freedom of religion, which has always been interpreted to be read with Article 3. Then Article 12, right and respect for education; Article 12.4, children's religion is determined by his or her parent; and rights to property. If you look at this, and that is when the government has been asked why still keep this reservation, the blanket answer usually that we heard is that it is in conflict with our constitution or Islamic law, which is to me an easy way out, rather than saying that we are not able to fulfill certain things. So personally, I do not see why we should still retain this reservation, because the protections are already there in our constitution. And if our constitution is our main law, is the most important law, and courts will not be able to implement anything which is in conflict with the constitution. So we should be able to withdraw the reservation, but it is up to the country how the country actually going to interpret this provision. But in terms of non-discrimination, I don't see why, because our constitution also have those provisions of equality, and then in terms of nationality, in our constitution there are provision of nationality, which unfortunately when we amended Article 8, we did not amend Article 14 and Article 15, because that's the two articles that are contrary or conflicting or discriminatory of women and children. Protection of children, what has been done as far as Malaysia is concerned, these are the things. These are, I'm sure Panami Bala would know this so much because she has been working with the ministry for a very long time. And the main national policies and law related to child's rights and child protection in Malaysia include the following. We passed the Child Act 2001, and this was amended in 2016. It was in view of when we ratify CRC. We have Domestic Violence Act still in existence, and we have amended it to give it some bite. I mean, before, when it was first passed, many people say Domestic Violence Act is a tiger without its teeth here. But later on, when we amended it in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, we actually have given Domestic Violence Act its teeth so that we can bite what could be implemented as such. Anti-trafficking in person and anti-smuggling of migrants, 2007, which also have provisions on children. Evidence of Child Witness Act, 2007, national policy on children and its action plan, national policy of child protection and its action plan, and national policy on reproductive health and social education and its action plan, plan of action on child online protection. What I was informed is that the government is now again trying to have a national policy on children, because the previous one has actually expired. And then we have the Sexual Offences Act 2017. We also have a couple of task force. I mentioned this few because these are some of the things that which I was involved in when I was in the Council for Protectors. Yep, Ahli Majlis Penyelaras Pelindung Kanak-kanak. This was, I can remember, until 2016. Then they changed it with the amendment of 2016. They set up the protectors team and also the other team, and then we also set up. Then I became members of the National Council for Children in 2016 to 19 before my appointment as a Children Commissioner. And we have task force on children being used for begging or seeking donations, task force on negligence parent, task force on children in detention, and also on child marriage, the one that I didn't mention here. What have Malaysia achieved now in terms of achieving, giving protections and giving children their rights? At the moment, to me, in terms of education, this is one of the main issues that have been brought up. And of course, during COVID-19, again, issue of child education has been there. Free schooling, preschool until Form 6. No exam fees. I mean, these were like gradually we were removing all the exam fees, all the school fees, and then in the end we also removed the exams. And then we also have schools like for children that conflict with the law in Hendrickson School. We also have the integrity schools in prison, where children, even if he's been detained, cannot be denied the rights to education. He should carry on with his education. We also have, we should have established school for unwed pregnant mother, but the thing is, there's only one state that have this run by state of Malacca, but others, unwed mothers or young mothers, these could be from 12 to about 16, 17-year-old. They are actually under JKM's care, yeah? But they do not go to school. That's the thing, and which to me they should have been given the opportunity to be given teachers, to be sent teachers so that they can do the exams and carry on with their studies, even if they're after they're delivering their children. And then the zero rejection policy, this was introduced, I think, after the general election 2018, and then access to school for children with special needs. We had, OCC had a consultation with person with special needs, and there's so much more that needs to be done in terms of children with special needs, because at the moment they join the Perdana schools, yeah, the government schools, but they had a lot of problems in terms of space. They don't have they are not friendly to children and so on and so forth. And even after they got a degree, graduated, how many actually can get a job, because many employers are not willing to take in person with disabilities. Protection of children against violence. Malaysia started off the Talian Nur in 2007, and now it's called Talian Kasih. However, the Talian Nur was actually, when it became Talian Kasih, it has lost the specialization, because Talian Nur, when it started off, it was the person who pick up the phone, specially trained staff with maybe in degree in counseling, but when Talian Kasih is being established, it is just ordinary operator picking up the phone and then channeling the person who making the phone call to the various person that are responsible to solve them. But this could deter children in particular, because somebody who pick up a phone call from a child should be someone who is an expert in the area and be able to understand children better. So child-friendly kind of complaint areas. We have the one-stop crisis centers. The Child Act was passed, and Sexual Offences Act 2017 was also passed. The Child Act was actually amended, and then they introduced the family-based care to provide more loving environment for every child, i.e. child in need of protection, care and rehabilitation, including children in conflict with the law, is placed in family and family setting. Now there's already a project pilot being done, and hopefully this will become, will be offered throughout the country. The National Council for Children was chaired by minister. But to me, it and consists of all the representative from government departments and 2 children. Yeah, but unfortunately, there's only 2 child. To me, National Council for Children should have more children, and the rest of the government officers should sit at the back and listen and try to resolve some of the problem that was raised by children. Abolishing of whipping in the courts. Yeah, the new amendment of the Child Act provide child offenders who receive community service order that will serve as a form of correctional approach to these children instead of whipping. And government also started the diversion project for children that conflicts with law, and it is still in progress before it could be implemented. Now, in the Child Act, you have categories of children that need care and protection, children that need care, that need protection and rehabilitation, children beyond control, children being abducted, trafficked, children who commit crimes. Now, this category of children, I think many of us probably know of it already. This is under the Child Act, and these are children, that is children that need care and protection. And these are children that have been abused or at risk of being abused, and children that has no parents, children that has been abandoned, and also children that behaves that likely to harm himself may also be given care and protection. And then we have children in need of protection and rehabilitation. A child in need of protection and rehabilitation if being induced into all the sexual act or physical or social environment which may lead him to perform such act. These are children that have some issues in this area, and that include children, girls that is pregnant or wedlock, and then children beyond control. I somehow rather didn't like the children beyond control provisions, because parent may request in writing to the court for children to detain the child in approved school, place of refuge, probation hostel, or center because the child is beyond control. I think when a parent sort of gave up on a child, then they should give up being a parent. And it is a pity that children beyond control have to be kept with children that conflicts with the law. And I certainly did not like this provision to be retained. And children that are being abducted or trafficked, this is also some of the provisions in the Child Act. Now, in terms of children that conflicts with law, I put this up because there's always a lot of problems in this respect, because they are still children. To be children that commit crimes, that conflict with the law, usually they are victim first. They whatever the environment they're living in, they start to do all these things. And then it is very important for everybody to know that once you arrest a child, police in particular, when they make an arrest of a child, the child must be kept separate from adult offenders at the police station, coming and going to the court. And then they must actually inform parents and welfare officer that we have taken these children in custody. But this do not usually happen. Yeah? And then the child must be brought before court for children within 24 hours. And usually all these children must be released on bail unless he's being charged for murder or grave crime. But even now, we have already a number of cases where, because they're very young, and the murder case is still is going to be heard, and usually the lawyers were able to post bail, and the children were sent back to their families until the day of the trial. And or in the best interest of the child, to remove him from association of undesirable person, court has a reason to believe that to release the child would defeat the end of justice. That's the only 3 kind of excuses, if at all you want to keep the child in detention after he was brought up before the court. But otherwise, to me, that's not a good excuse. They are children, and look at their age, and there must be reason why. And of course, they are still innocent until proven guilty, and it would be best for them to be on bail and still stay with their families, so that they don't have this, to me, you only need to visit these probation hostels and also even Henry Gurney, you would know, these children should not be kept there, or even to be in a police lockup overnight. It is a very sad situation, and this would be kept by this child will be affected until he dies. Yeah? And he may be found not guilty by the court, but the memory of being detained, having to sleep in a police station or police lockup is something that he has to go through it until he dies. So that is the reason why I think children should not be detained at all. Now, major concern. Okay, I have 5 minutes. I will quickly finish this off, and I just wanted to say that there are certain things that we still have major concern in Malaysia, despite what Malaysia has done. I think we still still discriminate children, especially undocumented, stateless, and refugee children. We have big issues on stateless children. We have issues on medical care now that children can take vaccines, and then there are anti-vaccines who actually didn't want their children to take even the normal vaccine upon birth, and child marriage is also an issue in Malaysia. Children in detention, violence against children. If we look at the statistics given by the police and also by JKM during COVID-19, from March 2020 until today, there's an increase of sexual and emotional violence against children, and the main perpetrator is the mother, second father, and then members of the families. And this is worrying. 82%, if I'm not mistaken, stated by JKM, 82% of the perpetrators are the child's mother. And then mental health issues, we are concerned that the children, I think it's related to COVID-19 and to MCO, because they were not able to go out. They are denied right to play, right to recreational rights, to be with friends, and to go to school. And this has caused a lot of mental stress, and there are children who commit suicide, case of bullying at schools, and then of course online exploitation with MCO, where children had to study online, and they are also facing risk being exploited online. And children do admit they do actually surf all those various websites, and we don't have any control in Malaysia. We don't even have food, and there's no law in terms of if their websites not supposed to be served by children. In relation of OCC, I just wanted to explain that we were set up on 1st September. We are in Suhakam, and OCC, as a children commissioner, I have the same powers within the Suhakam Act like any other commissioners to promote, and my job is to promote awareness and education relating to human rights, advise government and assist government formulating legislations, recommend to government with regard to subscription and sessions of treaties, and then to inquire into complaints regarding infringements. And we have 3 units. We have advocacy and advisory, we have education and promotion, we have complaints and monitoring. And we have our thematic areas: statelessness, stateless children, education, child marriage, removal of the reservations, reform of the Child Act, alternative to detention, sexual health education, and safety at Tahfiz School, and establishment of children consultative councils and complaint and monitoring. We have established it, and in terms of promotions of child rights, these are some of the activities that we have done. We try our most best, and I, in fact, has actually been talking to even the ahli members of the Dewan Negara on rights of children, because to me it's like giving as much as promotion to children's rights, to make as many people understand what is it all about. Then you are able to enforce certain laws, and we ensure that children are much better protected in that respect. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry I take a little bit longer than I should. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, in the little time given to her, Prof managed to give a beautiful overview of the 4 main principles of CRC, the articles which are so important, which is the best interest of the child, the articles that are really, really relevant to protecting the child, but they are unfortunately reserved. She also gave some information on the specific articles of Federal Constitution, the policies and laws enacted to protect children after the CRC, the policies, the different task force, some information on the different helplines, and last but not least, also explain in the short time how much OCC has done to try and protect the children in the country. Now we have about an hour for you to ask questions. So I see in the chat, um, okay, Prof, major concern. How do we address the impact of COVID-19 on children, especially those whose parents are hospitalized and who have died of COVID-19, if they are sent to government homes, even if it is temporary? Siblings may be separated and because they're different gender. You know, JKM Children's Home, girls go to one home and boys go to another home, right? So they raise this issue. We have seen no plans for the Ministry of Women to address the general situation of children in this pandemic. Prof?
Right.
Yeah.
I quite agree. In fact, when COVID-19 first started with MCO and all that, I think the ministry's main concern at that time, and also some of the NGOs, they were concerned about food, they were concerned about safety of families and making sure that people don't go out and contacting the disease. Yeah. I think NGOs, actually, we had a couple of consultations, what actually is going on, and a lot of people were complaining that they were not able to even to call 15999. And then when I think the first meeting of MKN, there was an announcement saying that we are going to talk 15999. I was like, if you're going to close the line, then who is going to help, you know,
Right.
the
Right.
children and all that? So in the end, we managed, we actually write letters, we make phone calls. We said, you can't be closing that line. So in the end, there was I think they were also confused because they're not used to it. It was the first time. So then they opened the line again. But it's also for people who cannot get food, cannot get bakul makanan, cannot get this and that. And when people have domestic violence, they call that line, nobody came and helped them. And even there are cases that come to us, they say, we call the police, but the police refuse to come to our houses because of domestic violence. So, and now I think this the past 2 months, you know, when we saw a lot of parents, a lot of children losing their parents to COVID-19. So even there were cases where I think I saw it in the WhatsApp group of a 12-year-old that has to stay by himself in the house. Because his father died, his mother is still in hospital. His sibling who had been finished the quarantine had to was looked after by the grandparents, if I'm not mistaken. So he's alone in the house by himself, being quarantined, and he's 12 years old. I mean, I can imagine what he's supposed to do. He probably didn't know how to look after himself. And I mean, the KKM officers that come and monitor ask him to look after himself. I mean, these are the things that worries me, because then I start asking, where do you actually put these children? I mean, there was a Facebook of one of the frontliners that this mother came to the CAC and said that she was in the verge of collapsing. She brought like 3 children with her, and young children. And when she collapsed, they helped the mother, and it was like, what do we do with these children? And by right, they should actually immediately call JKM. The protectors should come in and actually rescue those children. The children may be COVID positive. They must be quarantined first, check whether they are also having COVID, and then be kept, you know, in one of the houses. I mean, they don't even, at the moment, I think JKM have not even think about a special quarantine place for children who parents had gone off to the hospital, who are on the who's been intubated, who is in coma position, or who have died. And I think yesterday the government announced that there were 33 rumah anak yatim piatu for that parents who had died of COVID. Yeah? So they have identified 33 houses for these children. But again, as the person that asked the question, these children, I mean, JKM has this children house for boys, house for girls, and then children will be split, from one house to another. I think they should start thinking that maybe these children should be kept together because they only have each other. And of course, during COVID-19, even relatives, aunties, uncles, grandparents are not able to. If you have a grandparent is in Kedah, the children are in KL, they won't be able to come. Even uncle and aunties, maybe with special permits, they will be able to travel, but they were not able. If these children are being quarantined, they will not be able to look after the children. So we at the moment, I do not see and how this thing is going to be resolved. And I was really hoping that the ministry, the JKM in particular, would be able to come up with a proper SOP, proper ways in dealing with children whose parent had died due to COVID, or the parents are in hospitals, they are being left by themselves. I do know certain neighbors have been helpful, taking in children, these children with them, because they know families couldn't come because of the prohibitions on traveling and so on and so forth. So
Prof,
yeah.
currently, only gazetted Pelindung can actually remove the children. Even the frontliners, the medical social workers, they can only look after the well-being at that point of time. So there is urgent need to ensure that JKM definitely focus on the children instead of just focusing on looking at the food baskets, for example.
Yes.
Right? So maybe they have to relook at how they sort out their resources. Because at the moment, the resources are all focused into one particular sector. So that maybe they could look at another. There's another question, Prof. Peter wants to know, if I encounter a perpetrator committing violence against a child, can I face the perpetrator directly or call the police first? The reason is, by the time the police comes, it might be a bit late and I can't save the child.
Oh, very difficult question. But the person that is going to help the child, let's say it is, if it's within your neighborhood, for example. I mean, this is usually happen when you're a neighbor and you heard, let's say the parents are beating up the children, or the father or the mother, and the children were crying. You actually knock on their doors and wanting to find out, and a lot of Malaysian sometimes we just call the police, because they don't want to masuk campur and also jaga tepi kain orang. That's the normal Malaysian kind of attitude, because they said, if I go in, I might not be able to do anything because that's family matters. At the same time, to me, I mean, it depends on the person itself. If you look at the perpetrator is such a man with, he has a weapons, and you have to remember that somebody will die in the end if you don't do anything. But you may also be the person that will die because you are trying to save a child. So you look at the safety of that person. And some people just react immediately. And I know some people say, why try to be a hero? But sometimes it's very spontaneous reaction by just grabbing something and try to pull the child out of the scene. But again, I would advise, call police immediately. Say this is urgent, but this person have weapons. He's he's drunk. He doesn't know what he's doing, or he's with drugs. I mean, I would always call the police first, but at the same time, knock on the doors. Come with other neighbors so that you'll be able at least save the situation. If you could delay him from doing whatever he's doing, that would also help. But it is a dangerous situation when you come to that. The other thing is that I really appreciate people who actually come alert in them, be a good neighbor, look and inquire into safety of children, because there have been a lot of cases the child could have been safe, but because we are saying that it's not our problem, we're not going to interfere in family matters. Even in those days, I think Panemi may remember when we were discussing the Domestic Violence Act, a lot of women, even when they go to the police station at that time, the police say, what, Puan, you just go back lah, it's okay. Your husband will be okay. Sekarang sudah sejuk hati, whatnot. But in the end, you want to wait until she dies. That's the issue. I think then we got the act passed. And I do know that when we are assisting victims of violence, doesn't matter women or children, we must always try and get the assistance of the authorities so that we also do not endanger ourselves. And later on, have to go to courts, when something happens, you will be ending up going to courts up and down because that thing happened when you are there.
Yeah, I agree. So you have to look at the situation, but most important is you must take action. Don't walk away. So that's important. Yeah. There's another question from Alexander. First, he thanks you for the very informative session. Then he asks, how bad is the situation on the ground? Are there many cases of child abuse and mistreatment? Is there a difference to the severity of the situation pre-COVID and the last 1.5 years? Is the government fully committed to help to sort out child abuse apart from just signing the treaty?
Okay. If it's when you're talking about according to the police and JKM's data, the physical abuse has reduced in numbers. It's about 8.5%. But if you ask NGOs, I can see some NGOs representative here. They even WAO have different statistics. Yeah, because these are the people on the ground. The NGOs are the people on the ground. People will actually contacted them, seek their assistance in terms of whatever problem they have, child abuse or even food, other assistance. And if you look at that, but sexual and emotional abuse has increased. That is confirmed by the police and JK. But the thing is, I mean, I have been involved in this issue of child abuse and domestic violence. I think the way that these children were abused has, is something that unthinkable. Something that you don't think that as parents would do it to their own children. In particular for mothers, I usually think that mothers are the last person that would hurt their own child. I mean, if you remember how painful, what hardship you went through for childbirth, then you would never want anyone to hurt your child, or you yourself would never hurt the child. But somehow or other that has actually changed, and I don't know whether that is because of lack of parental skill. They are not prepared to become mothers, and the environment that has caused them a lot of stress. And these they were not given any assistance, and when a child misbehaves or something, that end up in abusing the child. And also what I also seen is that because a lot of the mother is married or divorced and then break up and have a new partner's boyfriend, and usually the boyfriend would injure the child. So this is the kind of a new trend which we don't see before. Before it is usually either parent, mother or father, and in the case of domestic violence, always the men who actually abuse their wife and then later on abuse their children. So in terms of seriousness, yes, it has become serious, in particular during PKP, because they cannot go out. Where do you go if you're being beaten up by your parents, yeah, or by your father or mother? So these are the things. And where do these children seek help? They can't go out if they are not in access of handphone. Who do they get help from? I mean, if it's in housing area, you live like in terrace house or even the PPRT flats, maybe she could just run and shout, or somebody would get the attention. But for babies, for younger children who cannot speak, how do they get help? These are some of the things that I think must be looked at seriously. And to me, violence against children, we really have to work harder in terms
Not
of
be tolerant.
if
Should
we
not be
can't abolish
tolerated.
it, we must at least reduce and make sure that people know, understand that children are not there to be abused. These are gifts from God, and they must be given their fullest attentions and care.
Correct. I agree. Violence against children should never be tolerated. And statistics show that children below 18 months is the group that is most vulnerable, and they are the ones who are under the category of being ill-treated by their own parents. So many of them die from the injuries because they are so young. Prof, there's another question from Chris. Prof, in the Sexual Offences Against Children 2017, Section 19 mandates that any person who fails to give information to the police of any sexual offense against children commits an offense.
Hello? Sorry, what was
About this mandated sexual offences against children.
Section 19? Yeah,
SOAC, Section 19 actually mandates.
yeah.
Mandate.
Obligatory on
So,
person to
yeah. So if you know anyone at all, family, neighbors, teachers,
yeah,
any one of you who knows, who knows,
must
you
make
cannot
police
hide.
report. Yes,
You have to report. If
yes.
ever it is found out, you pun kena lah nanti, right? So it's already mandated in the law.
Yeah.
So maybe it is related to the earlier question also, where if I know about a child being abused, I must report. So sexual abuse, you have
Yeah.
to report. It's
But
mandated.
yeah, sexual abuse is covered under the Sexual Offences Act, but other form of abuses, at the moment under the Child Act,
Correct.
only oblige caregiver families, expanded foster parent, and those who are within that definition, they are obliged to make the report to the police. But at the moment, we have not yet been able to make teachers to become to report. Doctors must report. Doctors, if the child is being brought before a doctor, and then say a private practitioners, and the doctor sort of give some medication, and the child went home, and in actual fact the child was abused, and there was internal bleeding. He did not realize that in actual fact doctors must be very careful when they're examining a child, look for all the spots if there are any bruises and that kind of thing. And then as soon as she or he suspected that the child is being abused, must make a police report. Yeah. And if she doesn't, in the end, she could also be prosecuted under the Child Act.
Correct. Okay. There's a question from Childline. Tatinong, she's there up there watching you. Can we push to the government to uplift the reservation on Article 2, that is non-discrimination? As long as goes into many other areas, because frankly, you talked about the best interest of the child, it totally contradicts. Because if it's best interest of the child, then you reserve discrimination, you discriminate, tak masuk akal, right? So as long as this is there, it goes into many other areas of the child's life: education, citizenship, care, marginalized children, undocumented, refugee, LGBT. The list just goes on. So we are advocating for you to advocate to uplift that.
Yes, in fact, I think I've already made it clear that OCC is actually advocating for removal of all. To me, we should remove all the reservations, because the constitution is there already. If you're so worried about freedom of religion and conscience, we have article in the constitution itself that talks about freedom of religion, Article 11. And then you also talk, if it's about children, you have Article 12.4. Now, in terms of this non-discriminations, I agree, because to me, if CRC is a plant, is a tree, we actually do not even have roots to that particular tree. So we are just like, the gantung. And we should remove non-discrimination reservation, because that is very important to CRC. When I first saw, when we first ratified, I think I was among the few that wrote on the reservations, and I said that to me, when you reserve Article 2, it's like not signing CRC because you're not giving children their rights. It's just so, and when you're even talking about best interests of children, you have to wait. All those best interests must be a priority. It is not being reserved, but when you're talking about best interests of children and in relation to non-discrimination procedures, then I think that's where we are caught, and we must actually remove those reservations. We are hoping that we could work together, Datin Wong and the rest of the NGOs, that we could push the government to actually withdraw these reservations. Yeah.
However, the preamble to Child Act says that all children, they refer to all children in the Child Act. Okay, there's another suggestion from Chris, who pointed out that it's mandatory under SOAC. Proposed that the Child Act be amended so that any person who fails to give information of any physical abuse or emotional abuse also be considered as an offense. Because at the moment it doesn't mandate. It only mandates certain persons. So there's a suggestion that anyone who knows has to report.
Report.
It's a suggestion.
Yeah.
For Child Act.
Yeah, it's true. Because after the case of that boy in Malacca, if I'm not mistaken, there was this boy. He was he died because he was looked after by a foster parent, I think, in Malacca.
Yeah,
and
foster parent.
Yeah, the mother divorced, and then the mother remarried. And then when he was about to start school, he was about 7 years old. The mother said, "I'm going to take my son back," and him to her with a new husband. And then he was found dead. And I think he was immersed in a big water tank or something like that. And neighbors actually said, well, we actually have seen him sitting outside the house crying and looking very sad, but no one actually asked him why. No one actually called the police or anything like that. They only say that after the boy died. In fact, the minister actually said we need to amend the Child Act and make it also an obligation for general public to make reports if they see or suspect child abuse. I think we should always remember that informers should be protected under the law. They cannot, whistleblowers should always be protected in terms of, because a lot of neighbors are worried if they make a police report, then you'll have problems with the neighbors and neighborhood. But I think it is always important for everybody to be alert. In terms of children, you must actually make a report if you suspect that this child is being abused. And just now, when we're talking about under sexual abuse, even sexual abuse, it is very difficult to find out if it's the perpetrator. If cases like incest, it is very difficult to find out unless it is the mother. So it actually imposes the duty of the mother to actually make a police report if you find out that your child has been sexually abused by your husband. So this actually is very important to me, making people in the the neighborhood, people in the surrounding, that actually make police report is very important because it will save the child.
Yeah. There's a question from Mary. She's actually referring back again to the previous discussion earlier, where children whose parents are hospitalized or have COVID. She says, why send them to an orphanages? Can there be some kind of way to unite them with families immediately when the parents are in quarantine centers or in hospitals?
Yeah, I think JKM's procedures, they usually will always try to contact close relatives. I mean, that's what I know. If they know of the phone number, or it will depend on the age of the children. Because if both parents are in hospitals, are not able to respond and do not have phone numbers, that is going to be very difficult, because younger children may not even remember the phone numbers, names of uncles and aunties and things like that. But if they're much older children, they have the phone numbers. Usually, I think, that's what I have seen. They would contact close relatives, and then we're able to offer. If close relative is within, let's say they are in KL, and they would usually take up with the children, because that one case where the 12-year-old were actually staying by himself, the other sibling went to the grandmother. So you can see that they are doing that now. And in fact, even when we were talking about this is something that we actually have to do awareness campaign, always say it on TV or radio or whatever, because when you go to the center for checkups, to say that I have COVID, I need to do a swab, or I am COVID positive, and please inform your relative, inform your friends. I think this is very important, because by not taking the children to the center with you, and then suddenly you collapse and nobody would know who to contact. That is the most difficult part, I think. But I mean, sometimes we tend to forget about all this, but it is very important for everyone to make sure that, especially now during COVID, to have a person. I mean, I do know that on occasions there are people who actually just call the last person that this person actually speaks to. Yeah. And then when you found a handphone of that person who collapsed, you call the number that you last call, and then that person will be able to tell who is this person, and how are you related to this, and so forth. Because it is very, very useful, those informations, especially now. I agree. I think we should be given priority. Close families should be given priority. The children must be family first, then only be taken to orphanage. I'm sure these children that was taken to this orphanage, they have close families that were able to look after them.
I do agree. The Palindong will actually contact the nearest and the dearest. However, I personally know that some extended family refuse to take the children because there is this fear of contracting the COVID themselves.
Now,
So JKM or even the frontliners in the hospitals, like the frontliners in the hospitals, have set up temporary nurseries in the hospital because the relatives refuse to take the children, even their own grandmothers. So there's no choice. So this is actually out of no choice. It's not that they want to send them to an orphanage. It's just that there are a lot of people out there who are actually scared. They don't want to take the children. So that's why they have to do that. So, okay, let's move to the next question.
I mean, I agree, because there was one case that was related to me. Somebody called me up and said that there was this boy is about 16 years old. I mean, he's a much older boy, but he contacted COVID, and he was supposed to be doing his quarantine at home. But what happened is that the parents say, okay, you can quarantine in the car. So the parent is staying in the house. So he let the child live in the car, providing him with buckets for him to do the number one.
Oh, dear.
It's terrible. And of course, this frontliner contacted me and said, oh, I feel so sorry for this boy. And in fact, at that time, the place of quarantine, temporary place, is quite packed. So the doctor said, you have very mild symptom, and I think you just stay at home. But parents can actually dare to do these things to their own children. What more grandparents, uncles, and aunties? So let me tell you, COVID has done, during this MCO, there are very weird parents around, and I think they said, oh, I'm much older, I might be affected by this, and because you went out, you took your own risk, so you stay in the car. So this boy has been sleeping like in the car for like 3-4 days until he contacted the KKM's monitoring officers, and then in the end he was taken to the night.
It's also a challenge if they don't have much space at home.
I know.
Room.
But this one they have space. They have space. There is a non-issue. To me, it's like, I mean, usually you have 3 bedrooms, so give one to that. Right. And of course, where you have to share bathroom, you cannot. I mean, they usually KKM, they will ask. This is the basic, the routine they just do. They say, how many of you living in the house? How many bathrooms? Is there a room with attached bathroom? Then you can quarantine this person. Otherwise, that person will be taken out, because we don't want the risk to be given to the other members of the family. So that is the usual thing that they must do.
Yeah. So there's fear. There's also a lot of fear in the community. So children become victims. There's another question. or this more comment from Thailand. There is a need to selaraskan the laws and policies that do not meet the age of children as defined under the CRC, underage, especially relating to child marriage. I don't know, is she referring just to laws or is it civil law versus Sharia laws?
Yeah,
Because that actually
I agree because
a lot of, yeah.
now we have in Malaysia, that's the reason why when we first started, when we first ratified CRC, we actually reserved Article 1 on definition of children.
Yes,
Yeah, because of the various definition in other statutes. We have not done that. I have
Yeah,
actually
they haven't.
argued in some of my writings that we could actually, synchronize it. We have one uniform definition. A child is a person under the age of 18. Full stop. And this, when we passed the Child Act, we could have just said, as far as the other laws are concerned, this act, these provisions on definition of child will repeal all other provisions on definition of children. You could do that. That it much easier. For Muslims, of course, I have gone through some of the materials in terms of age of a child. Yeah, because for Muslims, age of the majority age is being signified through a girl having her menstruals and boys having wet dreams. Yeah, but without all that, there are certain scholars or the mazhab actually applies the maximum age 18 years old. So to me, there is no conflict because the authorities are there. So even for Muslim, we could just have one definition: children, persons under the age of 18, meaning this person is baligh, and then actually line it with some of the criminal enactments of the Islamic criminal procedures or Islamic criminal laws, where the definition of baligh varies. Some states have 12, some have 15. I think we need to look at definitions of children, and the CRC is very open. And first, according to CRC, child is a person under the age of 18, unless the country decided to define it at a lower age. It could be 16, it could be 17. It depends on the state itself. Many countries put it 16, below 16 are children, above 16 are adult. I mean, depend on that particular country. So to me, you could actually have a one definition, and then it will become much easier to then legislate on other matters, in particular on child marriage.
Yeah, we agree. Because if you go by the child's age of getting a period, that's really very dangerous. With girls getting their periods younger and younger, 11, 10, so that cannot actually be the benchmarking. It's a bit dangerous for a girl. Okay, Thomas, Prof, based on your presentation, I cannot help but get the impression that our government is only half-hearted in trying to help our children. This is evident in their inconsistent stand on the various fronts. The sad thing is that the children are the future of the country. Do you feel frustrated in your position?
I cannot be frustrated. I cannot become children commissioner.
Yeah, but he says he hasn't finished.
Yeah,
And then he says,
at least the government
what do you personally think? What do you personally think are the top priority or critical issues that you could implement through your office, considering the limitations you face?
Well, I seriously am looking at. I mean, we have now the ministry strategic plan on menangani perkahwinan bawah umur, to look at causes of to abolish causes of child marriage. Yeah, at least the government has decided to have a strategic planning on that. I mean, that committee, the steering committee, and we also have various committee on family-based care, diversion. So at least there's 3 steering committees that we are looking at, and they are going to start alternative to detention soon in terms of children, refugees children in the depot and so on. Now, if you look at when we started, I mean, CRC was passed in 89, 1990. We only signed it like 1995. When we signed and ratified, we only passed Child Act in 2001. I mean, we are crawling. But you have to remember that luckily we signed and we ratified, and luckily we managed to pass the Child Act. That is a good start, and it's important, and we always reacted to situation. We passed the Child Protection Act 1991 when that Balasundram case, yeah, where the child was stabbed by his father and he died. That he was what, 9 months old.
Yeah, 9 months.
Yeah. So that was like, it shocks everyone. It was done by his own father, and then we said we need to pass something to protect children. So we passed the 1991 Act. When we signed CRC 95, we sort of, you know, we just, maybe we are planning to have the law pass, and our meetings on getting the act was long. I mean, it was given to UM to do a research and then come up with a draft bill. And then we have a lot of discussion between that. I know I was part of that. But to me, we can do a lot more. But the reason or excuse that has always been given by the government is the conflicting with the constitution, conflict with Islamic law. And then I did a research, even for CEDAW. I was the one who did a research for SOCAM at that time, whether CEDAW, the reservation of CEDAW conflict with Islamic law. And I said it didn't. And they should actually withdraw some of the reservation that they have done, but nothing has happened. And even those reservations in CEDAW and now also in CRC, I have looked into it because I'm a comparative law professor, and I do look at Islamic law as well, and I do not see there's any conflict in there, in those provisions. So by right, we should be able to withdraw those reservations. I'm not saying that because I think it's the history of children's right. Children's right has always been peripheral, has been something that we at one time were into getting mothers their rights, women their equal rights to men. Children are like, okay, we'll think about it later. But when CRC came in, you know, a lot of people think, oh, you also want to give children rights to education. And the most frustrating to me was like trying to get school to stop caning children. And we even have a road show and saying that parents want children to be caned. That's what the Ministry of Education was saying. And that, to me, have you asked the children, do they like to be caned? Do they like to be embarrassed in public as such? And our schools are getting back to worse. I'm sorry to say it does. The education system is getting back to worse. The way they're treating our children are really appalling. And seriously, we need to sit down and discuss these issues. The government, as Hakam, I think, have has talked and meet ministers and advising them these are the do's and don'ts. But it is up to them. They have to move it, and we are here to put the pressure on them to change these policies. But I don't think I'm frustrated, but I think a lot of the support given by NGOs and by various individuals, I think we still have a lot of hopes, and it doesn't matter which government comes into being. Our focus is rights of children, welfare of children, and best interest of children. That is very important for us to move on. I mean, they can talk about other things, but they must make sure that children are well looked after and protected.
Yeah, Prof, apart from having strategic plans, I think we also need to look at how they are implemented.
How they what?
How they are implemented.
Yes.
Because over the years, there have been so many strategic plans.
Okay.
So many. How were they implemented? Were the indicators achieved? I think we need to look at that also. So that's important. Yeah. And you mentioned about children in schools and they have problems. I like to know where are the parents? Because as a social worker, I see that parents now, many parents, I'm not saying all, they outsource childcare, they outsource the education, they outsource everything. So at the end of the day, the child also doesn't know its parent, the parent also doesn't know the child. Why? Because I'm very busy providing for my child. But you don't know what are you actually providing for your child when you're not there for your child? No. So even when you go to court, the parents don't even know the child was not at home because they were not at home themselves. So there's a lot of issues. You are right. Earlier you talked about parenting. I think parenting styles have changed. So much so that now they are not parents to the children. So even the child doesn't know whether he's part of the family. And we are now looking at how to harmonize intergenerational families because even that is lost. So I think a lot of issues to actually look at. There's one more for you. Child sexual abuse has now gone online. Malaysia was reported by NCMEC USA to have had 203,403 reports, that's for Malaysia alone, of suspected child sexual abuse and exploitation online. Images, videos of children were uploaded and downloaded from Malaysia. This is a new playground for sexual perpetrators, and Malaysia is not equipped to address this.
That one I agree, because if you we had our, I think when we had the Stop Violence Against Children's webinar, MCMC representative presented his findings, and he also talks about closing like 400,000 websites, accounts, and all accounts, Facebook, Twitters, Instagram, and so on. So, but the thing is, we don't have any law at the moment. We don't make it compulsory for these online providers to have certain check and balance, and particularly in terms of children. We should do a lot more, because especially now when children are using the internet too much because of they need to study. And even younger children, 7, 6 years old, all the tadika is also having classes.
Yeah, 2, 3 years old also looking
Yes,
at that.
yes, it's very dangerous. And I think what also education for parents, how to lock certain things, so that the children won't be able to surf other website and so on. I do know, like some parents give the children the iPad for them to watch cartoons and things like that. Sometimes this one is without any line and things like that. They just sort of upload certain cartoons so that the children can play around and some games. But for much bigger children, because they need to use the internet for schooling. And this is with our consultation with the children. The children themselves actually admitted, we know that our friends, while also doing online studies, are also online with other things. They can do, we can only do one thing at one time, but they can sort of put this the smaller screen and start saving. So this is the thing that we are worried about, and we rely on the general public, NGOs, and parents need to be made aware. They can't just say, okay, I'm also busy, I have work to do. I agree with you, Amy. For the past years, since the past 30 years, I think parents has become, because maybe it's the environment that we're living in, most parents are working, and we don't have enough, where B40 families in particular, in some families, people are just too busy with themselves, and then children have to manage themselves, and we still have problems like children, latchkey children being left at home by themselves because parents are working, awkward hours. Sometimes father do the morning shift, mother do the evening shift. So in between, they have the children like 1 or 2 hours. Children are being left by themselves, even small babies. The eldest could be like 5 years, the eldest could be 12 or 9 years old. The youngest could be a 2 months baby or 3 months baby. So we do have these cases. But I think I don't know, I think the ministry could do a lot more by giving free consultations, classes, parenting skills, and all that. We are propagating for all that so that parents are more aware. And now with a more digitalized world, they could be taught certain things. I remember when computers just came into being and we start using online. Being university lecturers. We also have to learn how to use computers and all that. But at the same time, I do work with a group of single mothers. We actually have classes. I bring in my students who are good at this. They're doing computer science and whatnot. So I said, can we go like once a week? I teach all these single mothers in this association how to use the computer. At least they can do sell things online. This was like 10 years ago that we started all this, but now is the need is even more greater. We thought that everybody would know how to use a computer, but not everybody knows how. Even handphones, only certain people can only afford certain types of handphone. They don't have a sophisticated one. So when they have to use a sophisticated one, they need someone to teach them the do's and the don'ts, and that could actually help them in terms of teaching the children or even monitoring their children's activities online.
Yeah. Maybe the government should support with resources so the community can look after their own community. You need to empower the communities. You cannot always wait for somebody from outside to come in to empower your own community. So
Yeah.
when you talk about sustainable development, it has to be long term. So the community should be empowered. What they
Yeah.
need is some resources, and then they can look after themselves. So there's another question. This is related to, remember, I mentioned that children are abused, the perpetrator is their own parent, like mothers abuse their own children. How do you propose, Tina asked you this question, how do you propose to address this you described? Children being abused by their own parents. What can we do? I think you sort of answered that question earlier when you're talking about empowering the parents,
Yeah.
parenting skills, community support, community participation. Anything else to add to that?
And the other thing is we child abuser, if they are parents, I think need a lot of psychiatric or counseling help. Yeah, because to me, stress and things like that, you really need to be given
Yeah,
proper treatment rather than punishing and sending them to prison.
correct,
Counseling,
correct.
psychiatric help really is important. I think Malaysia have not emphasized on that, and it is like you feel you're stigmatized. Pergi jumpa psychiatrist is like there's something wrong with your head, but actually it actually helps to sort out your own self, and also to be able to be I do know a lot some of these mothers actually love their children, but somehow or other they cannot control their emotions. So these are the things that I think what government should do, especially now with COVID-19. There's a lot of stress, especially in single mother families. Yeah, and also as I was already mentioning about mental health issue, children committing suicide and whatnot. So we need to have a stronger mental health or psychiatric assistance, which is free and accessible to a lot of people. Because if we don't, this thing will not stop. And then punishing these parents, sending them to jail for the death of their children or for abusing children. In prison, I mean, I have been visiting prison. What kind of rehabilitation things do they have in prison to make them realize? And if there is counseling, that would be better for this form types of mother. Because I met a mother who actually abused. She was there because of abuse cases, and I said, when I asked question like, "Why did you do what you did?" and she just cried. She cried, and you just think that the moment she was arrested, the moment she was sent to prison, I don't think she had been seeing anyone talk to anyone about what actually happened inside. So I think this is some of the areas that we are lacking in our family kind of community things. And of course, religious institutions play an important role. I think that if churches, mosques, you it's there, and you could actually empower yourself in terms of get in some volunteers from this background, counseling, psychiatric background, and you probably have doctors that would be able to do some help around the community and do it together with the religious community, and you will be able to help a lot of people. I think we can't rely everything, put it the government must do this, the government must do that. There are certain things that we ourselves in the community could do. And I mean, we do what we are good at. I mean, ever since I started off doing work on women and children, I first started by helping domestic violence victims. And they call me at night, like 3 o'clock in the morning. At that time, we don't have handphone. We only have home phone. And when they call me up, my husband would say, who would call you at 3 o'clock in the morning? These are domestic violence victims. And the question that they asked me, because they are Muslim, they said, if I leave the house, would I be nushus? Would she be an an disobedient wife? I said, for God's sake, your husband beat you up half bad. You might as well call up the police or go to the nearest hospital and then go to the nearest police station. Then she said, I don't have money, and I have to call friends. I asked her where you live, which area, so that I could call friend and the friend could go and pick her up and send her to the hospital. I mean, these are the things. And she would say, my husband is still in the house. This was like 20 years ago, before the passing of the Domestic Violence Act. So we do what we can in our own way, and I think it will help a lot of things in our society.
It's mothers who can't cope with their own stress level. So the nearest target is the child, and they fail to understand. A child also understands stress. The child also goes through stress. This external stress actually affects the child, and the child gets stressed out. So what does the child do? He cries, he runs up and down. Then the mother gets more irritated, and the next thing it will be pop, pop, pop. So the child gets beaten up. Okay. So again, coming back, if the community can kita jaga kita, we talk a lot about kita jaga kita now. If the community can actually be sensitive and help each other, we can help to reduce this as well. All right, so another question for you. Rita Wong, Professor, take for example the Cindy Ong's case, the former national swimmer. She had encountered sexual harassment and assault allegedly by the coach when she was a teenager. Will this kind of information trigger any alarm for the protector or social welfare officer to act on their own initiative to protect other voiceless children who are currently under training of the particular coach? Will the protector act on the presumption based on the said allegation that other children are in danger?
Okay. How the protector would react, I wouldn't know. But I do know that one of the things that I brought up with the minister when I met her in June last year, and through my messages, is I would like to see more empowered protectors, whereby if you look at the equivalent, what protectors are in the UK and in some other countries, a lot of people are afraid of protectors. When protector make phone calls, go and visit your house, they are afraid that the protector might take your children up. And also issue of sexual harassments. At the moment, we don't even have a law on sexual harassments, and we have certain criminal provision in our penal code. But in terms of like the sexual offences against children, we have certain provisions that more of like physical sexual grooming and things like that, which could also be put in or could be acted by, and then we have to make a police report. The protector should comes in, and protectors somehow or other. Some of my experiences with protectors is that they are hesitant. How shall I say it? Not willing to act, and they say, "Oh, we can't do this," because, in particular, I gave you an example of like sexual harassment. If the case is not in court yet or it is not been prosecuted, and the thing is, you look at the example of that girl, Ain, that actually make a complaint about the teacher making a joke in class about rape. And now she's being, being given she's being sued for 1 million ringgit by the teacher. So this is something that shouldn't have happened. And where's the protector in this case? Because she's still a child. Yep. So that's one. But I have cases where children is being denied. The perpetrator, the father, there is the mother has made a police report that the father is very abusive. Blah blah blah. Mother has taken the child to live with her, and then but still going to the same school. So the mother wants the children to go to another school to be transferred. So I said, what's stopping you from, moving the children to, oh, I don't have a court order. I don't have a right to custody of the children. Okay, I said, then get a protector. We go to the school and change the children's school because the children are being affected because the father is very abusive. But the protector said, I can't do that because there is no court order. So these are certain limitations. And I think what I would like to see is powers given to protectors and also assistant protectors. Many more NGOs are being appointed as assistant protectors, and therefore would be able to assist protectors in doing their work so that we could provide protection for children. In terms of sexual abuse in particular, I have heard a number of cases which was mentioned to me. There are certain coaches that do sexual harassment on their, especially on our athletes. So these need to be reported. There must be a body that investigate this. At the moment, I think if it's the issue of sports, it must be the Malaysian sports body that have to run a particular investigation in terms of sexual harassment. And I'm really hopeful that the ministry will bring in the sexual harassment law to Parliament, because I know that it has. I mean, we were called in for one of the consultation because the draft is ready, and it needs to be taken to Parliament. But I mean, we hope that Parliament will be open soon so that some statute could be taken in. But at the moment, I can see only all issues on COVID have been taken in, and now, of course, various other things are also brought into Parliament rather than issue of that affect children. Yeah.
Okay. For with reference to safety of children, whether it's sports or schools and all, won't child protection policy help? They're supposed to, wherever there are children below 18, there must be a child protection policy. So if there is a child protection policy, then we'll ensure that even the coach is screened, there's a handling procedures. So maybe that should be encouraged more.
Yes.
So we can prevent any kind of sexual harassment on the children who
Yeah.
go in because they have a certain talent, for sports.
Yeah.
So that's important.
I agree. But the thing is, because we only have the sexual harassment code of ethics for a place of work, that's the only one that we have. We need to have a proper statutes. And with the statutes, then we could actually have what we call sub legislations or bylaws, whereby you could have a proper SOP or procedures, and then all agencies, government, non-government agencies, could adopt these procedures to have it within their own institution, so that you can see whether if there is a sexual harassment case, they must investigate, have it, then only they can brought it the matter to various agencies. But a lot of our agencies do not even have sexual harassment policy, so we need that actually.
There's a question from Rita, whether any person has been prosecuted based on failure to report a case of child abuse, which is mandated under the Child Act or SOAC. Has there been any case of anybody who has been prosecuted because they did not report?
Not that I know of, but and usually when the police make the investigation, if let's say in the end the child is found, let's say dead, yeah, and it has been, usually if the child is found dead in the house, of course both parents will be called in and there will be investigation. And by right, I think if the abuser is the father, the mother had known about it but did not make a police report because that is her husband and she didn't want her to be in prison, and usually both will be charged in terms of that is the usual, depending on the police evidence as well. Yeah. But you must also remember that in terms of family matters, in particular domestic violence, the to me, battered woman syndrome. I've been reading about it quite some time ago, where a lot of mothers, a lot of women who has been beaten up by their husbands, yeah, abused, whether physical, emotional, or sexual, have this, things that they will not talk about it. They always feel that it is their fault. So when their children is being abused by the husband, she felt that that was the fault. So these are some of the psychological impact on the mothers. So that is probably, if it's within family, that's probably one of the reasons why they will not report it, and the police will not prosecute based on various aspects. But again, the other one was incest. Incest usually, but almost all incest, the wife or the mother knew, but she did not report it. Of course, with the new act, there is an obligation for her to report. But when she did not, when the case came out, she could be charged for being an accomplice. Yeah, but so far, I think it's only the perpetrator that has been punished or been taken to court and prosecuted.
There's a question from Vimal. I'm told he put up his hand. Vimal, are you here, Vimal? Vimal? I don't see Vimal. Vimal, are you there? Can you hear me?
No, it's not yet.
It's not here. Oh, because I'm told that he put up his hand. He wanted to ask a question. Sorry, I didn't see because the screen, it's not gallery view. Okay, what else?
What was the question?
Raised his hand apparently, but I didn't see him raise his hand.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay.
There's one more. It's going to be 4 o'clock. Father William, can I take just one last question?
Yes, please, what I mean.
Last question. Does anybody want to ask a question? Anybody?
I'll call you later. I'm in a meeting. Call you later.
No, then I'll read the last question. Okay. It's from Thailand. We currently have 2 Muslim girls whose father died 3 days ago. Mother collapsed at home and later died of COVID-19. Hospital says no next of kin. In such cases, the government should allow safe placement with a registered NGO or private care center for children who are negative, so siblings can be together. 2 COVID-19 hospitals in KL have reported their nurseries are full because kids come with parents or because of other emergency, no alternative care is available. Children looking after each other. So this puts a lot of stress on frontliners. So I think we have covered this earlier as well. Yeah. Okay. Prof. Okay, last one. Thomas. Prof, it gives me great hope for our children that you are so positive in your attitude and approach in trying to champion rights. Okay, there's one more. I don't know what's going on. Do I end? Prof, would you agree with me if I should say that MOE should include CPP, that even though they are 17 years old, they are still a child. There are other abuses besides physical abuse inflicted on children in educational institutions. Verbal assault, discrimination, because we know even in schools, teachers also discriminate, and it is a form of abuse. So, Father, can we end the question and answer session?
Panemi, there are in fact other questions also.
So shall we go on? A few more?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. Okay, this is on report. They said JKM usually wants us to make a police report first. Question from YouTube. Karen Das, what is the difference of a caseworker versus protector? What protector is a gazetted protector under the Child Act. JKM, right?
NGO is the assistant protector, is also gazetted. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. But their responsibilities are their limitations. caseworker could come from an NGO, could come from frontliners.
That's
Yeah,
right.
they handle the case. They do case management. But if you talk about protector, they have to be gazetted under the Child Act.
That's
So
right.
at the moment, it is only JKM officers.
That's right.
So Father William, thank you for your prof. Thank you for your excellent and timely presentation. OCC in the preamble notes during the conception of 2019 had mentioned about establishing a children's consultative council consisting of children who will inform the CC on problem faced by children and their grievances. Any update? Thank you.
Oh yes, we have set up the Children Consultative Council. We have set up, there are 20 children now in the the Consultative Councils of OCC. So how come? We meet with OCC 3 times a year, but they often met regularly between themselves and have meetings. At the moment, our CCC is doing a survey on online learning. They have, I think I've distributed the questionnaires and hope it will be passed on to everyone so that the children would answer those questions. And our CCC consists of representative from Sabah and Sarawak as well. So there are children in Semenanjung and Sabah and Sarawak. There's 3 of them for each Sabah and Sarawak. But they have their own Children Consultative Council of Sarawak, Children Consultative Council of Sabah, and then Children Consultative Council of Malaysia. And from that, we formed the 20 children to be the Children Consultative Council. So they are working, yeah, they are working, they are helping OCC with various policy matters. Yeah.
Okay. Archbishop Simmons asked you a question. Professor, the issues of child abuse and even domestic violence have not been given enough support so that many decide to keep it silent. In close-knitted community like a village, it is hard to report such cases as there are various side issues. 1, for the family concerned. 2, community frown on such reports as it brings shame on the kampung. 3, the loss of breadwinner of the, especially when a child is dependent on, and the wife is dependent on him. 4, often not being taken up seriously by authorities, and there may be not any conclusion. Conclusion to report. There's need for enforcement, support, and protection for victims. This is the mission ahead.
Yeah, I quite agree. I mean, it's for certain community, rural areas, community in particular. And I would say this in Sabah, because I've been to Sabah, an issue of incest, child marriages, and it's not an easy thing it's very complicated to me. Even issue of incest not even in rural area, but incest is one of the issues that family would try as much as possible to, sweep it under the carpet, keep it tight because it's family dignity, family, good names and so on and so forth. Same with child marriage. I think there's a lot of people that because in Malaysia, a lot of child marriage cases because they are already pregnant out of wedlock. And for a community that, put marriage is a very sacred thing and stigmatize illegitimate birth, for a lot of parents, doesn't matter, Muslim, non-Muslim, they would try their utmost best to hide this whole issue. And for Muslim in particular, they will push the children to get married because this will actually help or save their face lah, jaga air.
Reputation.
Yeah, that's right. So because of the complexity of the issues here, the crime, and also sometimes it's culturally inbuilt within a particular community, it is not easy to report those cases. But I think we individuals or association, NGOs, religious body would, I think, still be able to go into this community, do awareness campaign, and try to assist them to tell them, this thing is bad for the children. And what I also wanted is that I usually ask that in terms of let's say in incest situation, you see, when the mother is not working and she has like let's say 6 children, and the father has been sexually abusing maybe the eldest daughter, the mother would think that, okay, if I report this, he will go to jail, who is going to feed me, things like that. And this actually, and there must be someone who will be able to say, look, we must report this, this is a very bad thing, he's not doing any good to the family. And then the other thing is the support, the financial support must be there. That's where I think JKM and other community agencies would be able to help, because otherwise she will never report and this thing will never come out unless the children, when they grow up, they tell, they went to the police and say, look, my mother will never report this. Because when I visited Henry Gani, this is from my own experience, where I was doing a research, and I interviewed this girl, and she was in there. She's I think she was 16, 17, yeah, and she actually was sent to Henry Gani because she committed some crimes. And when I interviewed her and asked her, I said, why did you actually end up doing all these things? And she said she actually ran from home when she was about 13. And I said, why did you run from home? She said, because my father was going to rape me. And because of that, and I said, when I told my mother, she didn't believe me. She actually scolded me and said that I was just, creating stories. So after the second attempt, she said I would never, could never stay on. So I left, I ran away. And what can she do when she's only 13? So she ended up not going to school. She ended up, begging for monies, and end up doing, she was involved in stealing, robbing. So you just imagine. And when I was giving a talk to this group of children at Henry Gurney Girls, yeah, and I was talking about responsibility, respecting your parents, father and mother. You just imagine, out of, if there's a 10 children, I mean, there were at that time, I think there's about 30, 40 children, and there were 10 questions. Out of the 10 questions, 7 questions to ask me this almost the same question. How can I respect my father if he actually raped me, or he tried to rape me, or he abused me one way or the other? That's one question. The second question is that why is it my mother do not even want to hear what I want to tell her of my father's wrongdoing? So this, I think, is very important for us to know that children will need this some sort of help. But if we do not actually tell the parents or the mother that you must actually report this matter, so as a community, we must be able to do this. Otherwise, it will remain as such. And we can say this is like, and I do know some communities, you can just pay, under customary law, you pay certain amount of money, then the act of raping the girl was just, done. There's nothing to worry about. So, but it's wrong to have sex with a girl under the age of 16. It's rape, and that girl is very young and she wants to go to school. So you just cannot simply accept money as a compensation for having raped the girl. So this is wrong, and community should realize that.
Archbishop also asked, what can we do from our side to do our part? So I assume, what can the church do? What can we do?
The church, I think, a church or religious bodies, for me, is the same. You would invite people to come, or even give talks, awareness campaign. If people don't come to the church, you go to the people. So to me, that is as simple as that. I mean, I usually, I do not care where I give my talks about, sexual violence against children. if a surau call me, I will go. If a community said only under the tree we can have a chat about this, yes, I will still go, because I think it's important just to talk to certain mothers, because they have never been out and never heard about all these things, and they knew something was wrong was going on, and if they don't come to the church, you will have to go to them and to help them in terms of giving them knowledge and also how to go about making police reports. Yeah.
Father William hopes that the OCC, there will be an education for all children policy,
Yes.
education for all children policy to be implemented by 2025. So that for that to be achieved, OCC needs to ensure all children who are entitled by law to have a Malaysian citizenship are given such rights before free. Any comments, Prof? Thank you.
Actually, that's one of the thematic areas that we are having OCC's thematic areas, statelessness and also education. And our tagline is education for all. Actually, we wanted all children, doesn't matter who they are, documented, non-documented, or refugees, they must have a right to free primary education, because that part of CRC 28A 1A, yeah, free and compulsory education for primary education. So I think Malaysia has no problem of giving that to all children. And in fact, I think the Prime Minister, when he spoke on Teachers' Day, 16th of May, he actually said, yes, children have a right to education and all children will be given rights to education. And he actually specifically mentioned whether you're documented or undocumented. So I do not see why KPM is not implementing this, because that is a speech made during Teachers' Day. I mean, you could always Google and ask for the speech to be looked at, and KPM officers must actually know that children have a right to education. So when we first started in September 2019, that it has been our motto, education for all. And I see this in Thailand. I mean, I was the ASEAN representative to ECWC, and we had a program on ATD, alternative to detentions, and also how Thai government actually gave free education to all children. Doesn't matter whether they have documented legal or illegal immigrants and so on. And if they don't have documents, it is the school that gave them a card with a name, and that's about it. The child has a name on it, and the child could come come into schools. So we were hoping that was done. And the other issues that we have been working on is the issue of statelessness. We do have children. We actually have different category. We have categorized them. Children without citizenship. They are children with foreign parents, foreign father in particular. They are Malaysian children to us because mother is Malaysian. There are also children, foundlings, children that was just dropped in front of your doorsteps. These are Malaysian children. They couldn't have fallen off from the sky, so they must have been born in Malaysia, and it must be presumed their parents are Malaysians. And baby dumping is one of the issues that I think had caused a lot of children goes without citizenship. They have a proper birth certificate, but in terms of citizenship, JPN put. So we have persuaded so far. Our recent discussion with KDN recently, he actually said we are now looking into this issue in particular, where children are found, and these children will be given citizenship. I mean, the birth certificate will not put non-citizen, because and there is no need for, if someone adopted this child, have to prove that the child is so parents, child of someone, because the child was found and with no documents. So I think that is something hopeful, and we are still working. And of course, issue of citizenship, statelessness is something that we have to work very hard, because it also involves provisions of the Constitution. But otherwise, if it could be done administratively, and as I said, if there is a will, you can do it. It needs a political will to change the law at the moment. and the other thing that we are also working on, and we are hopeful that to build that stronger understanding at KDN in terms of issue of children, because children without documents, children without citizenship are denied rights to education, free education, denied medication or healthcare,
Okay.
free healthcare, and also other things. Refugees, we feel that because we know they are refugees, what we now wanted is just let UNCHR actually give them a card, then they could actually go. To me, there's nothing wrong for them to join us in the government school, because, and then at least by staying in Malaysia, by going to government school, they would know who Malaysians are, and they would be able to mix with the Malaysians, because we don't know how long they will be here, but they are refugees, and we have a humanitarian obligations to assist them.
There are several thank you messages for you, so I guess it's time for me to say thank you as well. But before that, Archbishop Simon has issued an invitation to you. If you go to Kuching, he says, please drop by.
Okay, I will. We have to wait until this MCO is over.
And someone, Alexander, I think, wants to know if they need to contact you, can they just contact the SOCAM office to get to you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely.
So that I think they can Google and get the phone numbers. So, Prof, I thank you so much. You've gone beyond your time.
I have my emails.
With
You can contact me through my emails as well, no problem. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. For your not only your time, but your sharing of all your relevant experiences in the country. Thank you very much. Can I hand over to Father William?
Yes, Puan Amy, thank you so much. I'm sure all of us participants here, we would like to say a big thank you, a big terima kasih to Professor Dato' Azia. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much. Thank
My
you
pleasure.
so much for your time. I remember when Gerald first asked you, your response was so prompt. So thank you so much. You know, the moment I texted him and he said, Professor said yes, I was like, oh my, is that true? He said, yes, yes, she said true. 14, she will come and speak to the Catholic Church. So thank you so much, Professor. Thank you once again, and for the great work that you're doing for Malaysia and for our children as well. And I must also say a big thank you to Puan Amy Bala, our moderator for today. Thank you. She's our very own, but nevertheless, I owe you a big thank you as well. Thank you so much. And I want to say a big thank you to all our participants who are present here now, and those who joined us earlier, those who had to leave, I guess they have some prior commitments, and those who are watching us live via YouTube and who will be watching us eventually. Thank you so much. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of two archbishops, Archbishop Simon Poe, who has extended an invitation together with the air ticket, I believe. I don't mind following you. And also Archbishop John Wong of Kota Kinabalu. Okay, so I'd like to invite Archbishop John Wong, if you could just say a prayer for us, and we will close today's talk. Archbishop John Wong.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you for this session. It is very enriching and also eye-opening. So let's conclude this prayer to thank the Almighty Father. If you are non-Catholic, you say your prayer your own way. But if you are Catholic, you follow me in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
God, Almighty Father, we thank you, we praise you, because you are the loving Father to all humanity. We thank you especially this afternoon, calling us together to listen to your words, to your wisdom, especially to take care of your creation, especially in the area of protecting the children, which is the gift that you have given to each one of us. Listening to you, we ask you to continue to help us to fill us with your spirit, so that guided by your spirit, no matter who we are, we will continue to live out the mission that you have entrusted to each one of us, especially the children you have entrusted to our care. As we end our session here, we ask you to continue to bless us, guide us, and lead us in whatever you have entrusted the mission to the different vocations that we are in. So we thank you, and we ask you to protect us as we in this time of pandemic, so that you always experience your protection and still with the energy that you have given us to continue the mission, the love that you have showered upon each one of us by loving one another, helping one another, serving one another. We make all this prayer to Christ our Lord.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Thank you, Archbishop John Wong, all the way from KK. Today's talk wouldn't have been possible without three people that I need to mention: the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. In the person of Ignatius, who's managing the ArchKL. Thank you, Iggy. Probably you want to on your video and say hi. I want to also say thank you to Tian Pereira. Tian, thank you. And also to Alexander, who has helped us at the back end to help us for a smooth flow. Thank you. And for all our followers, our listeners, thank you so much. Our next talk will be on the 28th of August, Saturday, same time, 2 to 4, title, Education Rights of Children in Malaysia. Education Rights of Children in Malaysia will be presented by Ms. Ajit Kaur Sidhu, a lawyer who pioneered and formed the Bar Council's Child Rights Committee. I'm sure Professor and Puan Emmy will know her, and a lot more of you. So thank you so much. See you on the 28th. Have a great weekend. Professor, terima kasih. Thank you so much. And Puan Emmy, and thank you to all of you. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.